The sun had just peeked over the ridgeline as Ethan Stone stepped out of his dark gray Tesla, blending into the gentle rhythm of the Asheville farmers market. The sky was a soft blue canvas stretching over the leafy streets, and the morning air carried the heady scents of roasting coffee, warm cinnamon, and even the fresh, earthy smell of clay from somewhere nearby. It was a crisp October morning, when every soft breeze hinted at autumn's slow, promising arrival. Wooden stalls lined the pavement, displaying hand-woven blankets, meticulously carved wooden toys, and vibrant stacks of fresh produce. Laughter drifted from a nearby stand where someone was offering samples of fig jam on crisp biscuits. Ethan didn't belong here, and it seemed everyone knew it. Even dressed in dark jeans and a rolled-sleeve button-down, he exuded a polished refinement, a sheen that clothes couldn't diminish. His boots were spotless, his watch too expensive for the crowd, and his presence was too still, too controlled. A few vendors offered polite nods, but no one tried to engage him. He liked it that way. For nearly a year, he'd lived secluded in the hills above Asheville, far from the boardroom noise and the media frenzy that had once tracked his every move. Tech prodigy, corporate visionary, overnight billionaire. They'd said those things as if they defined him, but now none of it mattered. Not since Sarah. Ethan walked slowly, his gaze drifting past jars of honey and vintage postcards, stopping only when he reached a stall that felt different. Handmade journals were stacked beside tiny ceramic dishes, each painted with soft blue swirls and warm earthy greens. A string of miniature watercolor paintings fluttered on a line above the table, vibrant sunflowers, children at play, and a small house rendered in a simple, warm heart shape. Behind the table, a woman in a faded linen apron, her curly brown hair loosely tied back with a ribbon, arranged her wares. Her eyes were focused, her hands moving with the precision of both skill and exhaustion. He was about to walk past when a small voice piped up beside him. "You look like someone who gives good hugs." He turned. The girl couldn't have been more than 6. Wild curls framed her face, and her dress had a small tear at the hem. Her sandals mismatched, but her eyes stopped him cold. Large, dark, curious, and far too knowing for her age. Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry." She tilted her head slightly. "I don't want money," she stated clearly. "I just want a daddy hug." His breath hitched in his chest. From the stall, the woman's head snapped up. She was already rounding the table. "Clara," she said, soft but firm. "Sweetheart, we don't ask strangers." "It's okay," Ethan said, his voice low, steadying himself. But inside, something was unraveling fast. He instinctively knelt, bringing himself to her eye level. "What did you say?" She shrugged, her voice softer now. "I see daddies hug their kids at the library at school. They look warm. I just want to know what it feels like." The woman had arrived, also kneeling at Lily's level. "We've talked about boundaries, sweetie. You can't ask people for hugs." "I know," Lily whispered, her eyes never leaving Ethan. "But he looks like he used to know how to hug." Ethan stared at her, stunned. There was no calculation on her face, no manipulation, just raw honesty, the kind that could shatter things without trying. He swallowed hard and stood slowly. I should go." But he didn't move. "I'm sorry," the woman said, rising with her daughter, an arm carefully draped around the girl's shoulders. "She's usually not so forward." "No," Ethan said softly. "She's just brave." The woman's expression softened. "I'm Clara," she said, extending a hand. "This is Lily. We sell our crafts here every Saturday." "Ethan," he replied. "It's nice to meet you both." He glanced at the little girl again. Lily had already turned back to the stall, kneeling by a sketchbook, drawing something with tight, small strokes of a dull pencil. Clara watched him carefully. "Are you okay?" she asked, surprising him. No one asked him that anymore, not in a way that truly cared. Yeah," he lied. She didn't push, just gave a small nod. "Well, if you need a journal to write things down, we have some." That almost made him smile. Ethan nodded, turned, and walked away. The colors of the market seemed brighter now, the scents more potent, and his heart beat an uneven rhythm. Back in his car, he sat in the driver's seat with the door still open, gripping the steering wheel without starting the engine. Lily's words echoed in his head. "I just want a daddy hug." He'd built a life most people envied. Silicon Valley had called him a visionary before he was 30. Forbes had featured him twice. His house had 40-foot ceilings, a wine cellar, and a pool no one swam in. But he had never hugged a child like that. Never even thought about it. He used to think emotional connection was a luxury he couldn't afford. The cost of presence of softness was too high. His sister had done all that. She'd loved, she'd given, she'd stayed, and when she died, the silence after was a kind he'd never expected. He'd written the checks for the hospital bills. He'd brought her body home. He'd paid for everything. But he hadn't stayed long enough to say goodbye to the baby who didn't survive. He couldn't. He hadn't cried in the hospital. Not once. He'd returned to his glass office and started working as if nothing had happened. One foot in front of the other. That's how you survive. But this morning, a 6-year-old's simple statement had cracked something deep inside him he didn't know was still buried. He closed his eyes, exhaling long and slow. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, as if she could see something he couldn't, as if she wasn't afraid of it. He hadn't even known her name until now. Didn't know Clara's story or why she looked both tired and luminous at the same time. But he knew he'd be back. Not because he had to, but because something in him was pulling. And for the first time in a very long time, loneliness no longer felt clean, noble, or necessary. It just felt sad. That night in his quiet house high in the hills, Ethan stood at the threshold of the art studio that had been sealed shut since Sarah's funeral. The doorknob was cold in his hand. He turned it anyway. The studio still smelled faintly of cedar and pine oil. Ethan stood in the doorway, unmoving. Dust motes drifted lazily in the golden shafts of the late afternoon sun. The easel stood in the center of the room, exactly where Sarah had left it. A dried streak of lavender paint still on the bottom crossbar. Her paintbrushes were lined up on the side table, their bristles stiff with time. A chipped coffee mug rested on the windowsill. He hadn't touched it since the morning she drove herself to the hospital. He stepped inside slowly, as if the room might collapse under his weight. Every wall held fragments of her memory, unfinished paintings, of bluebird sunrises, a series she'd started of peaceful houses. She used to say she could tell how loved a house was by the way it caught the light. Ethan had never understood what she meant until recently. He stopped before one of her paintings. A mother embracing a child beneath a tree with red leaves falling around them. No faces, just body language, comfort, presence. It hit him harder now than it had then. His fingers brushed the edge of the canvas. "I'm still here, Sarah," he said softly. "I just don't know what to do with it." Silence answered him, thick and patient. Downstairs, his phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. He ignored it. Emails. Julian probably trying to pull him into another investor call. "They're losing faith," Julian had said last week. "You need to show up. Remind them you're still the brains behind the machine." But Ethan didn't care what they believed anymore. He hadn't written code in over a year, hadn't stepped foot in his old office since Sarah's funeral. Let them lose faith. What was success if it didn't know how to stand still? When life shattered, he picked up one of the pencils from Sarah's desk. The graphite tip was slightly chipped as he rolled it between his fingers. Then, for reasons he couldn't explain, he picked up a clean sketch paper and began to draw. It wasn't perfect. His strokes were too stiff, too careful, but the shapes emerged. A small girl, curly-haired, arms outstretched, eyes bright, and beside her, a tall, unformed, hesitant figure. He stopped staring at the incomplete face. What kind of man knows how to stay when asked for something as simple and impossible as a hug? After that fateful morning at the market, Ethan couldn't shake the image of Lily. Her innocent words echoed in his head like a persistent refrain, piercing through the shell he had carefully built over nearly 4 years. He had a life people dreamed of. Silicon Valley had hailed him as a visionary before he was 30. Forbes had featured him twice. His mansion boasted 40-foot ceilings and a wine cellar no one ever used. But he had never hugged a child like that, never even thought about it. He used to believe emotional connection was a luxury, a risk not worth taking. The cost of presence, of allowing oneself to be soft, was too high. Sarah, his sister, had lived a life full of love, generosity, and steadfastness. And when she died, the silence that followed was a void he hadn't anticipated. He'd paid all the hospital bills, brought her body home, arranged everything. But he hadn't stayed long enough to say goodbye to the baby who didn't survive inside her. He couldn't. He hadn't shed a single tear in the hospital. Afterward, he'd returned to his glass office and buried himself in work as if nothing had happened, one foot in front of the other. That's how you survive. But this morning, a simple statement from a 6-year-old had cracked something deep inside him. Something he thought was buried forever. He closed his eyes, exhaling long and slow. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, as if she could see something he couldn't, as if she wasn't afraid of it. He hadn't even known Lily's name until that moment. Didn't know Clara's story or why she looked both tired and luminous at the same time. But he knew he'd be back. Not because he had to, but because something in him was pulling. And for the first time in a very long time, loneliness no longer felt clean, noble, or necessary. It just felt sad. That night in his quiet house high in the hills, Ethan stood at the threshold of the art studio that had been sealed shut since Sarah's funeral. The doorknob was cold in his hand. He turned it anyway. The studio still smelled faintly of cedar and pine oil. Ethan stood unmoving in the doorway. Dust motes drifted lazily in the golden shafts of the late afternoon sun. The easel stood in the center of the room, exactly where Sarah had left it, a dried streak of lavender paint still on the bottom crossbar. Her paintbrushes were lined up on the side table, their bristles stiff with time. A chipped coffee mug rested on the windowsill. He hadn't touched it since the morning she drove herself to the hospital. He stepped inside slowly, as if the room might collapse under his weight. Every wall held fragments of her memory, unfinished paintings of bluebirds, sunrises, a series she'd started of peaceful houses. Sarah used to say she could tell how loved a house was by the way it caught the light. Ethan had never truly understood that until recently. He stopped before one of her paintings, a mother embracing a child beneath a tree with red leaves falling around them. No faces, just body language, comfort, presence. It hit him harder now than it had then. His fingers brushed the edge of the canvas. "I'm still here, Sarah," he said softly. "I just don't know what to do with it." Silence answered him, thick and patient. Downstairs, his phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. He ignored it. Probably emails. Julian was likely trying to pull him into another investor call. "They're losing faith," Julian had said last week. "You need to show up. Remind them you're still the brains behind the machine." But Ethan didn't care what they believed anymore. He hadn't written code in over a year, hadn't stepped foot in his old office since Sarah's funeral. let them lose faith. What was success if it didn't know how to stand still when life shattered? He picked up one of the pencils from Sarah's desk. The graphite tip was slightly chipped as he rolled it between his fingers. Then, for reasons he couldn't explain, he picked up a clean sketch paper and began to draw. It wasn't perfect. His strokes were too stiff, too careful, but the shapes emerged. A small girl, curly-haired arms, outstretched, eyes bright, and beside her a tall, unformed, hesitant figure. He stopped staring at the incomplete face. What kind of man knows how to stay when asked for something as simple and impossible as a hug? That weekend, Ethan found himself back at the Grove Street Market. He told himself it was just for a walk to stretch his legs. But even he didn't believe it. This time he moved slower, less like an observer, and more like someone hoping to go unnoticed. The market buzzed with the late morning rush. Dogs tugged on leashes. A guitarist played a languid melody by the corner coffee shop. Children darted between stalls, chasing giant maple leaves. He saw Clara's stall before he saw them. Clara was arranging a new line of painted journals. Lily sat on a folding chair beside her cross-legged, like a tiny adult diligently sketching in her notebook. She looked up first. A smile burst across her face before she could utter a word. "Huggy man," she exclaimed, pointing with her pencil. Ethan froze. A few people glanced over, but it was Clara's reaction that drew him. She didn't smile. She didn't frown either. She just watched as if trying to read what kind of man came back for a second look. Ethan gave a small wave and walked towards them. "Hi, Huggy man," Lily beamed. "I drew you. You did." She nodded and held up her sketchbook. There in pink crayon were 3 stick figures. A woman with curly hair, a child with pigtails, and a tall figure holding both their hands. Above them, a giant yellow sun with a smiling face. Ethan knelt to her level, his voice soft. "I love that sun. It's warm like hugs." He smiled. "That makes sense." Clara cleared her throat gently. "Lily, why don't you go see if Mrs. Ruby has those apple crisps you like?" Lily looked up. "Can I show him my other drawings later?" "Of course, sweetie. Go on." As she scampered off, Clara gently crossed her arms. "She doesn't forget people easily." "I'm not sure I want her to," Ethan said, rising. Clara watched him. "Most men with watches like yours don't come back here." He glanced at his wrist. "It was a gift. I've never taken it off. But maybe I should." Her eyes softened just a fraction. "You came back for something—" "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe to buy a journal." Clara turned, picking up a sky blue one, with tiny flecks of gold leaf embedded in the cover. "This one's sturdy hand-bound. The paper won't bleed if you use ink." He took it from her, his fingers tracing the spine. "You make these every stitch. They're beautiful. Thank you." A silence settled between them. Ethan let it linger in no rush to fill it. Finally, she broke the quiet. "You seemed affected the other day." He looked down at the journal, then back at her. "She reminded me of someone. Your daughter. I don't have children." Something flickered across Clara's face. Caution, perhaps, or curiosity. She adjusted a ceramic dish. "Well, she has a way of getting into people's hearts before they know what's happened." "She has a gift," Ethan said. Clara nodded. "And she doesn't need that gift taken away." Ethan understood. It wasn't just a mother's words. It was a woman who'd known disappointment. A woman who'd learned that kindness sometimes came with strings, and those strings could fray. He stepped back. "I'll take this journal." Clara named a price, and he offered a few bills, waving away the change. As he turned to leave, she said softly, "I'm not ungrateful. I'm just protective of what's mine." He met her eyes. I wouldn't expect anything less." He walked away, the journal in his hand, unsure why his chest felt tighter than before. Back in his car, he opened the journal, ran his finger over the first blank page, and wrote slowly, "Sometimes love appears in the places you least expect and makes you wish you were a better man." Outside the market, the sun continued its ascent, and somewhere behind him, a little girl with a pink crayon was still drawing pictures of a life that hadn't happened yet. But maybe, just maybe, it could. Clara hadn't intended to stay late at the market, but the orders had piled up. 3 custom ceramic mugs, 2 hand-painted journals, and a batch of new lavender-infused bookmarks had to be done before next weekend, and she hadn't even started on the new set of earrings Ruby kept nagging her to make. The afternoon air had cooled just enough to feel autumn's slow, certain arrival. She rubbed her neck with one hand while arranging a bin of hand-sewn fabric bags beneath her table. Lily sat cross-legged on a blanket beside the stall, humming softly as she colored. Every so often, Clara would glance at her just to make sure she was still there. The habit had never left her. Not since Lily was born. "I brought sandwiches." The voice startled her. Not the tone, but its unexpected warmth. Clara stood quickly and saw Ruby Given's canvas tote in hand, her curly silver hair escaping a loose scarf. "I thought you'd be halfway home by now," Clara said, wiping her hands on a cloth. Ruby grinned. "And I thought you'd stop pretending you weren't starving by Friday evenings." She handed her a brown paper bag. "Turkey and cheddar. No tomato. Just how you like it." Clara smiled despite herself. "Thank you." Ruby didn't leave. Instead, she leaned against the corner of the stall and watched the foot traffic. That man was back. Clara stiffened slightly. Ruby raised an eyebrow. Tall, sharp jawline, sad eyes. "His name is Ethan," Clara replied, keeping her voice even. "He asked about my journals." Ruby looked up. "What did you tell him?" Ruby shrugged. "That they don't write themselves?" A silence settled between them, comfortable but aware. "You think he's trouble?" Ruby asked. Clara didn't answer right away. She wiped a ceramic bowl with a cloth, placing it next to a display stand. "I think he's trying." "Trying what?" "To figure out if he belongs." Ruby gave a soft sniff. "Men like that don't just wander into our market." Clara finally looked at her. "He doesn't feel like a man trying to buy anything." Ruby tilted her head. "No, he feels like a man trying to return from something." Clara lowered her gaze. "Lily took to him. Drew a picture of us all together the other day." Ruby didn't respond right away. Then she said softly, "That child has a way of seeing before others do." They both looked over. Lily was now asleep on the blanket, crayon still in hand, a soft snore escaping her lips. Clara's heart tightened, as it always did. Ruby placed a gentle hand on Clara's arm. "You know I love you, right?" Clara nodded. "Then you know I say this with care. Sometimes you build walls so high, even you can't see over them." Clara felt her throat tighten. "He's not... This isn't..." "I'm not saying you owe him anything," Ruby said gently. "But maybe let him stand on the porch before you assume he's here to tear things down." That night, Clara sat at her kitchen table long after Lily had gone to bed. The apartment above the bookstore creaked as the wind shifted. It wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny galley kitchen, and one of those old sinks that groaned when you turned on the water. But it was home. It was where Lily had learned to walk. Where Clara had cried the first time she had to turn down a high-paying job because childcare cost more. She traced her finger around the rim of the tea mug, in front of her, steam still curling. Her thoughts drifted to Ethan. How quiet he was, how he didn't rush to speak, how he didn't wear his pain like armor. There was something in the way he looked at Lily. Not pity, not charm. It was like recognition. Her phone vibrated beside her. A text from Benji. "How was your day? Need help with the kiln tomorrow? She smiled faintly. Yeah, 9 a.m. Bring coffee or I'm sending you home. She paused, then typed another line. And maybe help me move the glazes, thinking of trying something softer, warmer. The next morning arrived with a crisp breeze and the smell of damp leaves. Benji showed up in a sweatshirt 3 sizes too big and carrying a cardboard carrier with 2 lattes and a small muffin. I brought peace offerings, he said, setting them on the counter. Clara smiled. Bribes accepted. They worked in quiet rhythm for a while, organizing shelves, checking kiln temperatures, sorting brushes. It wasn't until they took a break that Benji finally said, "You're different this week." She raised an eyebrow. How so? Not bad different, just quiet thoughtful. You keep spacing out. She looked down slowly, peeling the wrapper off her muffin. Do you ever meet someone and feel like they remember something you've forgotten? Benji took a sip of his coffee. Like déjà vu. No more like they see a version of you that you used to be. Or maybe want to be again. He didn't answer for a beat. So you're talking about Lily's huggy man? Clara gave a small laugh. That's what she calls him. I saw him the other day. Very quiet type. He is. Benji leaned back in the folding chair. Do you trust him? Clara hesitated. I don't not trust him. Benji nodded slowly. You just don't trust your heart to want anything that could leave again. The truth hit harder than she expected. She didn't answer. Benji softened. I mean, just because you built something with one set of bricks doesn't mean you can't rebuild, with different hands helping. That afternoon, Clara walked through the market hand in hand with Lily, who was chattering about making a new storybook with drawings of talking animals. Clara let her talk, only half listening to the words. Then she saw him. Ethan was standing in front of Ruby's flower stall, holding a small pot of marigolds in both hands, unsure what to do with it. He looked awkward, out of place, but real. He saw her too. For one long second, they just looked at each other. No greeting, no hesitation, just looking. Lily tugged on her hand. Can we say hi? Clara paused, then nodded. Just for a minute. They walked over, and Ethan instinctively straightened. Hi, he said, offering a small smile. Didn't realize marigolds took so much deliberation. They're tougher than they look, Clara said, glancing at the plant. Seems fitting, he replied softly. Lily had already moved to stand beside the flowers. This one looks like sunshine, she said, pointing to the brightest bloom. Ethan knelt. Then maybe it's for you. He handed her the pot, and she clutched it like a treasure. Clara watched them, her guard still up, but her heart was doing something it hadn't done in a long time. It leaned forward just a little. The Saturday afternoon at the market ended with its usual calm. But within Ethan, a storm of emotions was brewing. He returned to his cold mansion, Clara's journal still in his hand. Every line he wrote in it was an attempt to understand what was truly happening to him. Something he had never felt, never allowed himself to feel, since the day Sarah left. That night in the large empty house, the steady tap of rain against the windows was Ethan's only companion as he stood in the studio staring at a pristine white canvas. He'd brought it out hours ago, stretched it, placed it on the easel, arranged the brushes just as Sarah used to, from thin to thick, soft to firm, each one positioned, so its bristles barely cleared the table's edge. But the canvas remained untouched. There was something about starting fresh that made his chest tighten. It had been over 4 years since he'd painted. Since before the funeral, since the house had grown quiet in ways he hadn't known a house could be. But now, for reasons he wasn't ready to articulate, the quiet didn't feel like peace anymore. It felt like a room waiting for life to return. He glanced at the old sketchbook resting on the bench nearby Lily's map. 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small, a porch swing and a red heart drawn on the roof like a protective ward. He didn't know what it felt like to deserve something like that. But he began to wonder if perhaps you didn't have to deserve it. Maybe you just had to show up. The next morning, the rain had stopped, and the air carried the scent of wet leaves and cinnamon from the bakery 2 blocks away. Ethan stood at the edge of the market's main square, holding a paper bag with 2 almond croissants and a coffee for Clara. She'd mentioned last week that she missed the pastries from her old neighborhood cafe, a small gesture. But he was learning that those were the ones that mattered. He didn't see Clara immediately. Her stall was set up, but she wasn't behind the table. Lily was, though, tying bookmarks to a decorative rope, her small tongue peeking out in concentration. She looked up and her eyes lit up when she saw him. "You came. I brought you something sweet," he said, offering a croissant. She took it and smelled it as if it were a bouquet. "Mommy's still getting glazes from the pottery lady. She said she'd be right back." "Can I wait here?" Lily pointed to a wooden stool. "That's the guest chair." He sat. "I'm honored." They worked together in silence for a few minutes, threading bookmarks into small loops while the market buzzed around them. Then Lily asked almost casually, "Do you have a mommy?" Ethan looked up. "I used to. She passed away when I was little." "Oh," she said, quiet for a beat. "Like my grandpa. I never met him." He nodded softly. "That's the hard part, isn't it? Missing someone you never knew." Lily nodded, her voice a tiny whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if my daddy would like my drawings." He swallowed. "I bet he would love them." She gave a small smile but didn't look up. Then abruptly, "Do you draw too?" "I used to." "Will you show me sometime?" He hesitated, surprised by the question. "Maybe," he said slowly, "if you promise not to laugh when I'm bad." "I only laugh when things are funny, not when they're trying." Clara's voice broke the moment. "Sounds like wisdom even I haven't gotten to teach you yet." She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, a half smile on her face. Her curly hair was neatly tied back with a red scarf, and her coat had clay smudges on the sleeves. "She's teaching me," Ethan said, rising. Clara tilted her head. "I'm starting to think she's teaching both of us." He offered her the second croissant. "You mentioned this once." She looked surprised. "You remembered?" "I remember important things." The air thickened slightly between them, not with awkwardness, but with a question neither of them had yet asked. Clara broke the tension, reaching into one of the bins behind her. "I wanted to show you this." She pulled out a mug, hand-formed, glazed in deep browns and ocean blues, with a thumbprint indentation along the side. The kind of detail only someone who'd lived through a morning could make. "I made this yesterday," she said. "Don't know why. Just kept thinking of you." He took it, turning it slowly in his hands. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's quiet," she replied, "but strong." Their eyes met again. Something passed between them. Then something heavy but kind, recognition perhaps, or the realization that both of them, in their own ways, were rebuilding. Ethan took a deep breath. "I started drawing again." Clara blinked. "You did?" He nodded. "Last night for the first time in years." "What did you draw?" He paused. "A house. 3 figures, one tall, one medium, one small." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you," he continued. "I didn't want it to put pressure." She shook her head. "It doesn't." He waited. "It feels like hope," she said. A sudden gust of wind pulled a few dried leaves across the pavement. Somewhere nearby, a musician played a slow tune on a guitar. Clara stepped closer. "You know," she said, "sometimes when I'm molding clay, I don't know what I'm creating. I just move with the wheel, trusting the shape will come." He looked at her. "What if it doesn't?" "Then I start over. But most of the time, it becomes something I didn't expect, something better." Ethan smiled a soft and genuine smile. "I'm not good at trusting the shape." "You're learning," she said. "So am I." Just then Lily ran up with a handful of pressed flower cards. "Mrs. Ruby said I could give you these." She dealt them out like invitations to a secret garden. As Ethan bent to take his, she whispered, "I'm glad you stayed." He looked up at Clara. "Me too," she said. And in that moment, simple, unadorned, wrapped in petals and the scent of cinnamon, something fragile yet unshakable settled between them. Not love yet, but its clear beginning. It was the roof again. A steady drip in the hallway near Lily's room. One of those quiet, persistent sounds that seem to wait for the cover of night to reveal themselves. Clara stood on a stool with a towel trying to wedge it into the weak spot in the ceiling. As the wind outside picked up, the autumn storm had arrived faster than anticipated. The drizzle had turned into a downpour, and thunder was now rumbling somewhere behind the mountains. She exhaled and climbed down the fabric already damp. The towel would hold for a while, but not all night. The sealant on the roof had needed repair for months. She'd patched it with caulk twice, but Asheville's unpredictable skies always had a way of undoing temporary fixes. "Mommy," Lily's small voice called from her room. "I'm here, sweetie." Clara walked in, pushing damp hair off her forehead. "Just checking on the leak." Lily sat up, eyes still sleepy, clutching a stuffed frog. "It's loud tonight." Clara climbed onto the bed, pulling the covers over both of them. "It's just the clouds dancing." Lily yawned. "Are they happy or sad, Mommy?" Clara thought for a moment. "Maybe both." Lightning flashed, illuminating the ceiling for a moment, followed by a low rumble of thunder. Lily's fingers tightened on Clara's hand. "You're safe," Clara whispered. "I promise." There was a knock on the front door. Not loud, not urgent, just unexpected. Clara hesitated. She slowly got up, kissed Lily's forehead, then padded barefoot to the door. When she opened it, Ethan stood there, soaked a small black toolbox in one hand and a rolled-up tarp in the other. "You mentioned a weak spot in the roof last week," he said. "I saw the forecast and thought it probably couldn't wait." Clara blinked, caught between surprise and disbelief. "You came all the way here in this storm?" He offered a sheepish smile. "I've driven in worse. Besides, your coffee's better than the gas stations." She stepped aside without a word. The moment he crossed the threshold, the house felt different. Less weary, less lonely. "I'll check the crawl space in the attic," he said, walking down the hall, as if he remembered it well. "It started there last time, right?" She followed him. "Yes." "To the left, over the linen closet." Lily appeared at her bedroom door, sleepy but smiling. "Huggy man." He looked over his shoulder. "Hey, superstar. Are you fixing our roof?" "You're talking to it very politely." She giggled, then yawned and shuffled back to bed. In the crawl space, Ethan worked in silence, his flashlight beam casting shadows on old planks. Clara stood at the bottom of the ladder, watching dust motes swirl in the light. "I should have handled this weeks ago," she murmured. "You handle everything," he called down. "That doesn't look like failure." She didn't respond. A while later, he climbed down, his shirt damp with sweat and rain. "It's not perfect," he said, "but the tarp will hold until you can get someone out here." She nodded. "Thank you." He leaned against the wall, exhaling. "Growing up, I never liked storms. Why? Too much uncertainty. You never know what's coming first, the thunder or the silence afterward. Clara tilted her head. Silence doesn't sound so bad. It is, he said, when it means no one's coming. Her eyes met his and something flickered there. Recognition again. The deep kind. The kind that lives behind your ribs. Are you okay? She asked softly. I don't know. The vulnerability in his voice hit her hard. I just keep showing up because it feels like I have to, he said. Like this place, this thing about you and Lily. It's not something I meant to observe from the outside. She stepped closer. But I'm afraid, he continued, his voice low, almost breaking, that I'm going to want it too much, that I'll mess it up, that I won't know how to stay without hurting something. You're not hurting anything. You're waking up things I thought I'd buried. She reached out hesitant, then gently touched his arm. That's not hurting, she said. That's healing. He closed his eyes for a beat. When he opened them, the room felt both heavier and warmer. I'm sorry I didn't bring the right tools, he said, trying to shift the mood. You brought yourself, she whispered. He looked at her. You should stay, she said. Not forever, just tonight until the storm passes. He nodded slowly. Okay. They sat in the kitchen, the old tea kettle whistling on the stove, rain still tapping at the window like an old friend with stories to tell. Clara handed him a mug, their fingers brushing, lingering. You always show up at the most important times, she said. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because in that small kitchen with the storm-lit dance on the countertops, they both understood something unspoken. Sometimes love doesn't begin with a kiss or a confession. Sometimes it begins with a knock on the door in the rain and a toolbox on the stoop. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind the scent of damp earth and pine. Sunlight poured gently through the kitchen window, bathing the countertop in gold. Ethan sat in the same chair as last night, sipping coffee from the mug Clara had given him. The mug was still warm in his hand, both the drink and the gesture. He looked out into the still-shadowed backyard, alive with bird song and quiet life, listening to Lily hum softly in the hallway. Clara moved around the kitchen without rush, barefoot, her hair loose from sleep. She wasn't performing, wasn't making a ceremony of the moment. She was simply living. And perhaps that's what made it feel so real. Did you sleep well? She asked, glancing over her shoulder. He nodded. Better than I thought I would. Lily wanted to let you sleep in. She said she didn't want to scare the hug away too soon. Ethan chuckled. That child is a walking poem. She is. Clara placed a plate of food in front of him, a slice of toast, scrambled eggs, and a few strawberries cut into heart shapes. He looked at it for a long moment. She did this. Clara smiled faintly. Every Saturday breakfast has to have a shape. She says it helps the food remember you. He couldn't stop the smile from spreading across his face. Then I guess I'll have to remember the food too. They ate in silence for a while. The kind of silence that didn't demand conversation, only presence. Then Clara asked, Do you miss your old life? Ethan set his fork down, considering. Sometimes. But not in the way people would think. What do you mean? I don't miss the boardrooms or the speeches. I don't miss the champagne celebrations or the articles with my name in bold. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting towards the window. I miss the person I thought I was going to be. I miss the man I was trying to be back then, before it all got tangled up in ego and hurry. Clara said nothing. I built something great, he said, but I forgot how to build something good. She watched him carefully. And now I think I'm starting to remember, but it's like learning to breathe differently. Clara looked down at her coffee mug. "I know that feeling," she said. "I used to think my worth was tied to what I produced, what I could show the world. Until Lily came along and showed me that love isn't a product. It's presence every day." He looked at her. "There are days," she continued, "I wonder if I'm enough. If just being present is really all she needs." "You are enough," he said without hesitation. "You're more than enough." The words hung in the air. Not flirting, not flattery, just truth. Clara exhaled slowly, as if an invisible weight had been lifted slightly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Soft, familiar. Clara opened it to find Ruby holding a bundle of herbs and a skeptical look. "Well, well," Ruby said, peering inside. "I see you survived the thunder." Ethan stood, rubbing the back of his neck. "I stayed in case the roof caved." Ruby handed the herbs to Clara for the leak. "Lavender and peppermint. It'll make the house smell like you wished for the rain." Clara chuckled, tucking the bundle into a jar by the sink. "Thanks, Ruby." Ruby didn't leave right away. She glanced at Ethan, then back at Clara. "You two are walking a tightrope." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Ruby." "I'm just saying," Ruby continued, pulling out a tin of cookies. "One of you better learn to trust the safety net soon, or you're both going to keep wobbling." With that, she turned and walked away, her coat trailing behind her, as if she'd just dropped a riddle and left with the answer. Later that afternoon, Ethan found himself back in his studio. He stood before the canvas, which he hadn't touched since sketching the initial house. But today, he added color, a soft yellow for the porch light, a gentle green for the grass, the tiniest touch of blue in the sky. He painted slowly, deliberately, each stroke intentional. And when he stepped back, there was something new on the canvas. Not just the house or the figures, but warmth. That evening, his phone rang, an unfamiliar number. He answered, "Hello," a woman's voice, professional, crisp. "Mr. Whitaker, this is Sienna Ross from the Asheville Children's Art Foundation. Clara Harper listed you as an alternate contact for Lily's application." He straightened. "I'm sorry?" "She did what? I'm calling to confirm her acceptance into our fall mentorship program. Lily's drawings were part of a market display last week. Our scouts took notice." Ethan blinked. "That's incredible." "She listed you under support system. Is that accurate?" He paused, then said softly, but definitively, Yes, it is." After hanging up, he sat in silence for a long time. Support system. The words resonated in his chest like a quiet drumbeat. That evening, he knocked on Clara's door again. No storm this time, just him, an email printout from the foundation, and another small canvas. She opened the door, and before she could speak, he held it up. She got in. Clara blinked. "What? The mentorship program? Lily." They saw her work, and she got in. Clara, she actually got in. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes welling. Ethan offered her the canvas. On it, the house was the same as before, but this time, there was a swing set. A tiny girl sat on it. A porch light glowed. Clara stared. "I wanted you to see what I see," he said, before I knew how to say it. She looked at him, stunned. Then she reached out slowly, surely, and pulled him into a hug. No hesitation, no caution, just warmth. And this time, he didn't feel like an outsider being invited in. He felt like someone who had come home. The morning after Lily's acceptance into the mentorship program, the market air was a celebration no one planned, but everyone participated in. Vendors brought small gifts to Clara's stall, a basket of scented erasers from the stationery booth, a new apron hand-stitched by a neighboring seamstress, even a watercolor postcard with "Little Artist" written in shimmering gold ink at the top, signed simply, "For Lily, keep making magic." Lily beamed at every gesture, hugging them, like treasures running in and out from behind the stall, too excited to sit still. Clara tried to keep things flowing, but her heart wasn't entirely focused on the usual work. Something had shifted, something she hadn't yet found the words to describe. A warmth bloomed in her chest that made it hard to concentrate. And Ethan was different too. He arrived with breakfast again, but this time it wasn't a quiet offering. It was pancakes tucked into a small star and heart-shaped insulated box. Lily says, "Art deserves beautiful shapes," he said, sliding the box onto the counter with a broad grin. "I'm just following orders." Clara raised an eyebrow but couldn't stop the laugh that bubbled out. "You made these?" "I bribed a diner cook, but I supervised." She looked at him carefully. "You're good at this." "Good at what?" "Us. This." Ethan didn't answer right away. He turned towards the street where the light filtered through the changing leaves, where laughter spilled from stalls and boots crunched softly on fallen acorns. "I'm not sure what this is yet," he said slowly. "But it's the only thing I want to get right." The words landed between them with a soft thump. Before either could say more, a voice cut through the air. "Ethan." He turned. A woman stood a few feet away, tall, polished, her auburn hair neatly tied in a ponytail, dressed in business casual that was sharp and confident even amid the market's rustic charm. Clara straightened. The woman walked closer. "I can't believe it. You're actually here." Ethan blinked. "Sienna." She nodded, her smile brighter. "Oh, how long has it been?" 2 years, 3. Clara stepped back slightly, suddenly feeling uncertain. Ethan offered a polite, strained smile. "Almost 4, I think." Sienna looked around. "I thought you moved to Europe. Weren't you on a sabbatical in Oslo?" "I came back, needed space, and found it here." She laughed, not unkindly. "I always thought you'd be in a Manhattan brownstone, or at least some coastal retreat. I thought I'd try somewhere people still wave." Sienna glanced at Clara, then back at Ethan. "Old friend?" she asked casually, gesturing towards Clara. Before he could answer, Clara extended her hand. "Clara Harper, Lily's mom." Sienna's gaze shifted. "Ah, I see." There was something in her tone. Not quite rude, but it spoke volumes beyond the words themselves. Clara held her posture, her smile still in place, but fading. "I was just in town for a pediatric conference," Sienna continued. "Thought I'd hit the market before my last session. Can't believe I ran into you." "Small world," Ethan said, his voice lower. "Well, it was good to see you." She reached out and touched his arm. Quick but familiar. "If you're ever back in the city, let's grab coffee." Ethan made no promises, just nodded. And then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd as quickly as she'd arrived. Clara said nothing. Ethan turned to say something, but the words tangled, unformed. "That was unexpected," he said. "Friend?" She asked, her voice light but taut. "We dated in a past life." Clara turned away, focusing on rearranging journals. "Didn't realize people from your world knew how to find this place." She didn't. It was just luck, right? A long silence. Not anger, just disjointedness. Lily ran up from Ruby's stall, arms full of tangerines. "Look, Mrs. Ruby gave me extras because I'm famous now." She didn't notice the shift in the air. She didn't need to. Children know. Later, as the market dwindled and the last customer waved goodbye, Clara began packing up slowly. Ethan quietly helped. When the last bin was loaded into the car, she turned to him. "I don't know what you were to her, and frankly, I don't need to." He waited. "But I need to know," she continued, her voice low but firm, "that whatever this is, Whatever we're building, it's not just a detour from your old life. I can't be someone's quiet place while they figure out where they truly want to be." Her words landed deep within him, not with anger, but with truth. "I'm not leaving," Ethan said. "I've heard people say that before." "I'm not them," Clara nodded, but her eyes didn't soften. "Then stay," she said softly. "Truly stay. Not just when things are quiet and good." And with that, she climbed into her car. Lily waved cheerfully from the back seat, oblivious to the thin thread of tension stretching between them. Ethan stood in the golden light of the setting sun alone again. Not because of distance this time, but because of doubt. He didn't know how to fix it, but he knew he wanted to. And that was perhaps the first real difference between the man he had been and the man he was becoming. The morning after Lily's acceptance into the mentorship program, the market air felt like a celebration no one planned, but everyone joined. Vendors brought small gifts to Clara's stall, a basket of scented erasers from the stationery booth, a new apron hand-stitched by a neighbor. Even a watercolor postcard with "Little Artist" written in shimmering gold ink at the top, signed simply, "For Lily, keep making magic." Lily beamed at every gesture, hugging them, like treasures running in and out from behind the stall, too excited to sit still. Clara tried to keep things flowing, but her heart wasn't entirely focused on the daily grind. Something had shifted, something she hadn't yet found the words to describe. A warmth bloomed in her chest that made it hard to concentrate. And Ethan was different too. He arrived with breakfast again. But this time it wasn't a silent offering. It was pancakes tucked into a small star and heart-shaped insulated box. "Lily says art deserves beautiful shapes," he said, sliding the box onto the counter with a broad grin. "I'm just following orders." Clara raised an eyebrow, but couldn't stop the laugh that bubbled out. "You made these?" "I bribed a diner cook, but I supervised." She looked at him carefully. "You're good at this." "Good at what?" "Us. This." Ethan didn't answer right away. He turned towards the street where the light filtered through the changing leaves, where laughter spilled from stalls and boots crunched softly on fallen acorns. "I'm not sure what this is anymore," he said slowly. "But it's the only thing I want to get right." The words landed between them with a soft thump. Before either could say more, a voice cut through the air. "Ethan." He turned. A woman stood a few feet away, tall, polished her auburn hair, neatly tied in a ponytail, dressed in business casual that was sharp and confident, even amidst the market's rustic charm. Clara straightened. The woman walked closer. "I can't believe it. You're actually here." Ethan blinked. "Sienna." She nodded, her smile brighter. "Oh, how long has it been?" 2 years, 3. Clara stepped back slightly, suddenly feeling uncertain. Ethan offered a polite, strained smile. "Almost 4 years, probably." Sienna looked around. "I thought you moved to Europe. Weren't you on a sabbatical in Oslo?" "I came back, needed space, and found it here." She laughed, not unkindly. "I always thought you'd be in a Manhattan brownstone, or at least some coastal retreat. I thought I'd try somewhere people still wave." Sienna glanced at Clara, then back at Ethan. "Old friend?" she asked casually, gesturing towards Clara. Before he could answer, Clara extended her hand. "Clara Harper, Lily's mom." Sienna's gaze shifted. "Ah, I see." There was something in her tone. Not quite rude, but it spoke volumes beyond the words themselves. Clara held her posture, her smile still in place, but fading. "I was just in town for a pediatric conference," Sienna continued. "Thought I'd hit the market before my last session. Can't believe I ran into you." "Small world," Ethan said, his voice lower. "Well, it was good to see you." She reached out and touched his arm, quick but familiar. "If you're ever back in the city, let's grab coffee." Ethan made no promises, just nodded. And then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd as quickly as she'd arrived. Clara said nothing. Ethan turned to say something, but the words tangled, unformed. "That was unexpected," he said. "Friend?" she asked, her voice light but taut. "We dated in a past life." Clara turned away, focusing on rearranging journals. "Didn't realize people from your world knew how to find this place." She didn't. It was just luck, right? A long silence. Not anger, just disjointedness. Lily ran up from Ruby's stall, arms full of tangerines. "Look, Mrs. Ruby gave me extras because I'm famous now." She didn't notice the shift in the air. She didn't need to. Children know. Later, as the market dwindled and the last customer waved goodbye, Clara began packing up slowly. Ethan quietly helped. When the last bin was loaded into the car, she turned to him. "I don't know what you were to her, and frankly, I don't need to know." He waited. "But I need to know," she continued, her voice low but firm, "that whatever this is, whatever we're building, it's not just a detour from your old life. I can't be someone's quiet place while they figure out where they truly want to be." Her words landed deep within him, not with anger, but with truth. "I'm not leaving," Ethan said. "I've heard people say that before. I'm not them." Clara nodded, but her eyes didn't soften. "Then stay," she said softly. "Truly stay. Not just when things are quiet and good." And with that, she climbed into her car. Lily waved cheerfully from the back seat, oblivious to the thin thread of tension stretching between them. Ethan stood in the golden light of the setting sun, alone again. Not because of distance this time, but because of doubt. He didn't know how to fix it, but he knew he wanted to. And that was perhaps the first real difference between the man he had been and the man he was becoming. The first chill touched Asheville like a quiet secret. Clara stood on the porch, a mug of chamomile tea cupped in her hands, watching her breath plume in the morning air. Across the street, the last market stall was being dismantled for winter. The wind carried scents of pine and wood, and a distant guitar drifted from a cracked window. Inside the house was warm lit by soft lamps, and Lily hummed softly as she colored at the kitchen table. Ethan's laughter drifted from the hallway, low and comforting, as he tried to untangle Lily's shoelaces, which had somehow knotted themselves into an intricate puzzle. "We might need a degree in riddle theory to get these undone," he said. Lily giggled. "They're strong, that's how you know they're good." Clara smiled faintly, taking a sip of her tea. This was their rhythm now. Shared mornings, art supplies everywhere, grocery lists on the fridge in 3 different handwritings. Everything felt steady. Everything felt earned. But even peace had its shadows. Later that afternoon, while Lily was at Ruby's helping arrange the winter-themed displays, Clara found herself in Ethan's studio. He was sitting at his desk, leafing through a stack of mail. She noticed the envelope in front of him. Thick paper, a familiar logo in the corner, Whitaker Foundation, New York. He picked it up, frowned, then set it down as if it had burned his fingers. "What is it?" Clara asked softly. "They want me to be the keynote speaker for their annual conference," he said, his voice tight. "Apparently someone nominated me as a transformative legacy innovator." She tried to smile. "Sounds impressive." "It's not. Don't you want to go?" "It's not about wanting to," he said. "It's about what it means if I say yes." She waited. "I'd have to go back to that world I left. I'd have to shake hands with the people who applauded my exhaustion as if it were brilliance. Fly back to that skyline, that stage, that version of me." Clara gently crossed her arms. "Then don't go." "It's not that simple," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I spent a decade building that reputation. Now they want to dust it off and parade it like I never left. She watched him. And what do you want? He looked at her, truly looked. I want mornings like this. Paint on my hands, Lily's drawings taped to the fridge. You here. She exhaled. Then tell them no. He hesitated. Clara stepped closer. Unless a part of you wants to say yes. Silence. He turned away. Not for ambition. For closure. Closure? He nodded slowly. I want to stand on that stage and not need it anymore. I want to prove to myself that I didn't fail, that I left on my own terms, that I didn't disappear. I evolved. Clara's eyes softened. Then go. He turned back to her, surprised. But only if you come back, she said softly. Not just back to Asheville, but back to us. Because if you go to prove something to them and forget what you've proven to yourself here, then that's not closure. That's a rewind. He looked down at the envelope. I don't want to lose this, he said. You won't, she said, touching his arm. Unless you forget why you built it in the first place. The moment was fragile, authentic. That night, Ethan stood in the backyard under the stars, the still unopened envelope beside him. Lily was asleep, clutching a clay hedgehog he'd made for her earlier in the week. Clara was inside, curled with a blanket and a half-read novel. And still, the invitation weighed. So he made a choice. He didn't discard it. He didn't say yes. He placed it on the studio's shelf beside the very first sketch he'd ever drawn in Asheville, the little house with the porch light. And beneath it, he wrote a note, I have what I was looking for. I just need to stop looking everywhere else. When he walked back inside, Clara looked up, her eyes meeting his. Did you decide? He nodded. I'm right where I need to be. And when he took her hand, there was no hesitation, only presence. The morning breeze carried a new softness, as if winter's chill was finally loosening its grip. Clara stood in the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour, as she kneaded dough for Lily's favorite cinnamon rolls. Music played softly from the radio, some old Motown tune that made the house feel warmer than even the heat from the furnace. From the hallway, giggles drifted, Lily's voice, then Ethan's, then both dissolving into shared laughter. She smiled without looking up. Their sound, it settled into her bones like a truth. A few minutes later, Lily burst into the kitchen holding a piece of paper like a treasure. Mommy, she gasped. Guess what? Clara wiped her hands on a towel. What is it, sweetie? Lily held up the paper. Next week, I get to do show and tell at school. Ms. Harbin said we can pick anyone important to us and talk about them like a hero. That's wonderful, Clara said. Have you picked someone? Lily nodded, beaming. I want to talk about Ethan. Clara blinked, caught off guard by the rush of emotion that came faster than she expected. Why him? She asked softly. Because he listens, Lily said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. And because he stayed. Clara knelt in front of her daughter. He'd be so honored. Do you think he'd come watch? Clara nodded. We can ask him. I already did, Lily said proudly. He said yes. Before Clara could reply, Ethan appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame, naturally coffee mug in hand. I told her I wouldn't miss it, he added, giving Clara a look that held more than just affection. It held commitment. Lily ran off again, probably to start sketching her poster. Ethan stepped into the kitchen, setting his mug down by the bowl of dough. She didn't even hesitate, he said. She never does, Clara replied, her voice soft. A pause. Are you okay? He asked. Clara leaned against the counter. It still surprises me how quickly she lets people into her heart, how easily she loves. She's brave, Ethan said. She learned that from you. Clara turned away, blinking hard. Ethan stepped closer. You're doing it right, Clara. With her, with this life. She allowed herself to look at him, her eyes wide with something close to fear. You really think so? I know so. Then, he gently touched her cheek. You built this world for her. She just invited me in. The doorbell rang. They exchanged a look, surprised. Clara wiped her hands again and crossed the room. When she opened the door, her breath hitched. It was Lena Lily's biological grandmother. Clara hadn't seen her in over a year, not since the last attempt at reconciliation ended in long silences and unanswered calls. Hello, Lena said, her voice tentative. Clara didn't move. Lena held up a small, worn box. I found some of Eli's things, a few drawings he made as a kid. I thought maybe Lily should have them. Clara swallowed. You could have mailed them. I wanted to come, Lena said. I've been following your art updates and the studio and Lily's little market stories. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly. You never answered my last letter? I was afraid, Lena admitted, that I'd say the wrong thing, that I didn't deserve to come back. Ethan moved to stand by Clara, quiet but firm. He didn't say a word, just stood beside her. Lena glanced at him, then back at Clara. He's the one, isn't he? The one she mentions in her drawings? Clara nodded. She calls him Mr. Warm, Lena said with a small smile. She always could name feelings better than facts. A quiet beat. I'm not asking for anything, Lena said. Not visits, not holidays. I just needed you to know I've never stopped thinking about her, and I'm so grateful she's loved. Clara slowly took the box. Inside were crayon sketches, naive, endearing. A treehouse, a dog, a self-portrait labeled Eli, age 9. The lump returned to her throat. I don't know what forgiveness looks like, Clara said. But this is a start. Lena nodded, her eyes watering. I'd like to visit again, only when you're ready. We'll let Lily decide, Clara said softly. But thank you for this. As the door closed behind Lena, Clara stood still for a long moment. Ethan took her hand. Are you okay? I think so, she said. It's a lot. You don't have to carry it alone. She leaned into him for the first time. I know. And in the living room, Lily hummed softly, drawing a picture of 3 people holding hands under a sky full of tiny hearts. All still standing, all still here. The snow had fallen overnight. Not a blizzard, just enough to blanket the trees and silence the town in a soft white hush. Asheville's rooftops sparkled like sugared cakes, and the sidewalks were covered in a tranquil quiet. It was a morning when everything was still, as if the world had paused to breathe. Clara stood by the window, coffee mug in hand. The ceramic felt warm against her skin, grounding her as she watched Lily in the yard. Boots, gloves, pink coat zipped to her chin. She was halfway through building a snow fox, not a snowman, because snowmen were boring. Ethan stood beside her, watching too, his shoulder touching hers in a way that no longer startled her. She's going to be late for Ruby's, he said, smiling. She's making art, Clara replied, sipping her coffee. That counts as being on time for school. He chuckled, then fell silent. Are you okay? Clara nodded, but slowly. It just feels like something is ending today. He looked at her. Or something is beginning. She didn't answer right away, just leaned into the silence with him. A few minutes later, Lily burst through the door, cheeks, red nose, sniffly hair matted to her forehead under her hat. I named it Clover, she gasped. The snow fox. Perfect, Ethan said, taking off her gloves and rubbing her hands between his own. Clover the snow fox. Lily beamed. Go wash your hands, sweetie, Clara said. Ruby's expecting you in 10 minutes. Lily darted off to the bathroom. Clara and Ethan were alone again. A weighty feeling settled in the room, unspoken, but thick. Ethan, she said softly. He turned to her, reading her tone instantly. I've been thinking about what Lena said, she continued. About forgiveness. He nodded, waiting. I didn't just build walls around Lily. I built them around myself. Even from you. I know, he said. But I never tried to climb over them. She looked at him confused. I waited, he added, because I didn't want to break them. I wanted you to choose the door. Clara blinked, stunned by the simplicity of it. I have chosen, she whispered. He stepped closer. Then let's build something new. Something that doesn't need walls. She nodded. It wasn't a grand gesture, no passionate kiss, no symphony. Just the quiet way she leaned her head against his chest and the way his arms came around her as if they'd always known how to fit. That afternoon, after Lily had scampered off with Ruby, fully equipped with cocoa and glitter for an Ice Queen mosaic, Ethan took Clara for a walk around town. They ambled past the shuttered stalls of the winter market, past the bookstore where Lily's artwork still hung in the window, past the mural wall where last summer's brushstrokes still clung to the weathered wood, and finally to a small studio on Pine Street. It wasn't large, just a single room with a sloped roof and a big front window. But the sign on the frosted glass said it all, clay and light. A place for small hands and big hearts. Clara stopped. Ethan. I leased it last week, he said. Ruby helped me handle the paperwork. You're kidding. I'm not, he said softly. It's for you and Lily, and for the kids in this town who've never held a lump of clay, but carry whole worlds inside them. Her eyes immediately welled with tears. You're opening a studio. We're opening one, he said. Tears tracked down her cheeks. She didn't bother to hide them. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small round object wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it. It was a tiny ceramic heart painted with 2 houses side by side and a single tree between them. I don't need skyscrapers or spotlights anymore, he said. I need this something real. Something that gives more than it takes. Clara looked up at him, her eyes shining. You've given us everything. He shook his head. You gave me something first. You gave me belonging. They stood there in the snow. Everything was quiet except the sound of breath and belief. As they walked home together, hand in hand, the house glowed like a postcard. Lily's drawings were hung throughout the living room, like banners in the kitchen, once again smelled of cinnamon. That night, as the fire crackled in the hearth, and Lily curled between them with a book about constellations, she suddenly looked up and whispered, Do you think families always know when they stop growing? Clara glanced at Ethan, then back at her daughter. No, she said. I think sometimes we grow without seeing. Lily nodded as if that made perfect sense. She turned a page, burrowing deeper into the quilt. And as the stars twinkled softly through the window, Clara closed her eyes and let the peace settle. No fanfare, no fuss, just love, one hug at a time.